passing over to myself, so you are stuck with a broad northern accent for quite a while, but hopefully you can understand me clearly. But I just want to kind of start with a little bit of the history and a recap of the journey so far. I'm conscious there might be people on the call that are already aware of some of the initiatives that we're working with the Digital Greenhouse on. Kind of in the centre of the screen, you will find a little bit of a timeline and some key milestones on that. So in Q1 in January last year was kind of the launch of the Digital Skills Initiative. Safe to say, obvious, everyone knows COVID hit across kind of Q1 and Q2, so we had to adapt some of our delivery models. Initially, there were some initiatives that involved some kind of face-to-face teaching, so we had to adapt that delivery model and ironically work in an agile way to be able to deliver those learning solutions. And across Q2, so it was at the end of June, we delivered the first of the Digital Leaders Workshop. So just to kind of set the scene, we've got 4 learning initiatives, and as we progress through the slides today, I'll be sharing kind of key information on each of those. So some of these milestones that you see on the timeline will make a little bit more sense as we progress. But we delivered the first of 4 Digital Leaders Workshop in June last year. Then in September last year, we launched the Google Squared cohort, which is the professional digital marketing program. We actually have the cohort due to complete at the beginning of April, so they're due to complete very soon. Then in October last year, we started delivery of the first cohort of apprenticeships across data analytics and the IT infrastructure technician program. And then the kind of 2 major milestones that are coming up in the next quarter, in May specifically, is the launch of the 4th learning initiative, which is what we call our Targeting the Customer campaign, which are made up of what we call labs and mini labs, which, to simplify that effectively means some digital marketing workshops, all focused on how to target a customer. And then we're also delivering the last of the 4 digital leader workshops as well in May. So we'll share details of each of those initiatives and also those dates as well. And what you have surrounding that timeline is just some feedback that we've had so far from participants across our different programs. And genuinely speaking, it's been every single learning initiative really has been positive feedback. It's been a great journey. The feedback has been excellent. It's had real impact on businesses. My advice as well, if you are speaking, if you do know anyone that's maybe been on one of our digital leaders boot camps or on the Squared cohort at the moment, speak to them about their experience. They're the best people to share that. So it has been, fingers crossed, and I believe this is a feeling that's been kind of mutually shared, but it really has been a success so far. And kind of a few key things to note as well is that kind of the whole purpose of this is to help Guernsey businesses thrive within that digital environment. And it's not just about creating an excellent learning experience or an interactive learning experience. We want that, of course, but what we really want to do is actually kind of embed those behaviours moving forward and give businesses a framework and an infrastructure in place that they can actually use. So I think that's where you get the real added value from these learning solutions, is the fact that what happens afterwards. So that's something that we've found to be in a kind of real positive position. And I mentioned about the excellent feedback, and I just want to kind of share that some of these learning initiatives that we're delivering at the moment with Guernsey, it's not just with Guernsey at the minute. We've delivered some of these to kind of large global organisations. Some of them include BT, Amazon, Microsoft, Vodafone. We're also working with AstraZeneca as well, which is quite topical at the moment. But yeah, that's just hopefully helped summarise a little bit of kind of an overview of what we've done so far and the journey that we've been on. You'll also see there that the NPS is plus 63, which, if you're familiar with the Net Promoter Score, anything kind of plus 30, anything over plus 30 is regarded as good. So it's been, yeah, excellent feedback that we've had so far. So hopefully that helps kind of summarise the journey that we've been on. So I mentioned there's 4 initiatives, 4 learning solutions that we're currently working on at the moment. And what I've done in this particular slide is just summarise really within a sentence what each one of them are. And as I mentioned before, I'll be going into finer detail on each of them as we progress. So the Digital Leaders Virtual Workshop, that's all about how to drive that digital culture, kind of giving you the infrastructure and the foundations in place to kind of lead on digital transformations. So traditionally speaking, that particular workshop is delivered over 2 half days. There's normally 2 half-day sessions delivered by one of our facilitators. We actually have a session coming up in May for that, on the 26th and 27th of May, and we'll share details at the end if you did want to sign up. But yeah, that's kind of the first initiative that we launched. The second one is the Google Squared Online. I mentioned earlier that it's a globally recognized digital marketing qualification developed with Google. So it's a 6-month program that all looks at kind of all aspects of digital marketing. So it's delivered across a 6-month period. We've then got apprenticeships. So just bear in mind with apprenticeships, kind of the information that I'll be taking you through is specifically the data analyst apprenticeship. We do deliver other apprenticeship programs, but the initial demand has been around data, so I've just decided to focus on that. But the apprenticeship programs are normally around 18 months. As I mentioned, we started the first cohort in October last year. And the best way to describe the program for me is that it's broken down into kind of practical and theory. So it's all about demonstrating your competence in your day-to-day job role, but also learning kind of key kind of topics within that area. So within data, we look at structures, database systems, look at kind of SQL, RapidMiner. If you're familiar with data, I'm sure that term will make sense to you. But a variety of kind of practical and theory-based kind of learning methods that we have within that. And then the final one is targeting the customer. Now that's made up of different workshops. So this is a new initiative that we're launching in May. So we've got sessions running on the 5th, the 19th and the 20th of May. So it starts on the 5th of May with a half-day workshop which looks at kind of customer-centric marketing. And then it follows up 2 weeks later with kind of 2 half-day workshops across what we call our brand activation lab. So just to clarify, that's kind of 3 half days that you'll be attending across a 2-week period. And the whole purpose of this particular learning initiative is about kind of pinpointing your customer's journey before the purchase. So kind of looking at the key components around the digital marketing campaign and when to target your customers at the right time through the right channels. And again, I'll allude a little bit more into those, but that's kind of an overview of the 4 learning solutions and initiatives that we're delivering at the moment. So moving on then to the Digital Leaders Workshop, just in a nutshell, really a summary. So and what it focuses on is developing mindset for kind of creating that innovative culture. And that might sound kind of some buzzwords really, but ultimately what it's about doing is developing the confidence of business leaders and aspiring and future leaders as well. And I mentioned before about providing that framework and that infrastructure to actually lead change across digital. Across a digital transformation. So it's delivered over I mentioned before, a 2 half-day workshop, and it's all about kind of how to get those foundations, get that infrastructure in place to then kind of implement that digital change moving forward for your organization. So it covers a variety of different topics, and on the next slide we've got a little bit more of what that journey looks like. So I'll dive into the modules as we progress. But in terms of the learning outcomes, what you'll have at the end of it, you can see in the middle of the screen. So it looks at kind of gaining that deeper understanding and implications of the digital landscape. So what that does in effect is highlight some evolving technologies and look at kind of modern customer landscapes as part of that. We also learn from external case studies and look at how others have actually approached that digital transformation. In addition as well, what we do with that is kind of look at how you can apply those design thinking principles and how to kind of better empathize with customers. The third point, looking at kind of excited and being confident about the mindset and leadership behaviors. So it kind of looks at how to adopt an agile mindset. Agile is very much a buzzword at the moment. It's kind of everywhere you read, it's all about, certainly in the last 12 months, how businesses have adapted to those changes. So this particular learning outcome focuses on how you can adapt an agile mindset and how you can build that kind of iterative work methodology, so kind of like testing and learning and doing it at a quick pace. So looking at all those things that are needed to be able to kind of start that digital transformation. And it also looks at defining personal actions as well needed to actually implement change. So that looks at kind of how to recognise the strengths of your organisation, kind of what works well, what doesn't, and identify kind of ways that you can overcome those barriers. So they're the areas that it focuses on. And as you can see there, it's I mentioned before, it's a 2.5-day workshop, which are normally two successive days. And the facilitator that's delivered the previous 3 and will be delivering the one in May as well. It's a guy called Neil Perkins. And just to give a bit of background on Neil, again, the feedback for him has been excellent. I think his average score has been about 9.3 out of 10 in terms of his tutor facilitation. But just to give a bit of background on Neil, so he's the author of 2 best-selling books. So you're looking at kind of the books that he has, Building an Agile Business, How to Do That, and also an Agile Transformation as well. So they're the 2 books that he's got bestsellers in at the moment. So he's worked with the likes of Financial Times, Samsung, YouTube, M&S. So he's got good experience and in a position to kind of lead on this particular workshop. So yeah, that's a little bit on Neil. Just moving on to the actual the structure of the 2 days that you're covering. So I mentioned it does say day 1 and day 2, but just bear in mind that these are half-day sessions, and normally we deliver them usually from about 9 till 1 typically. But in terms of what you'll be studying, it's broken down into kind of 4 sessions really. So across day 1, you're looking at digital context. And digital context is looking at kind of technical trends, looking at business shifts, applying that framework. Digital disruption kind of looks at those particular topics. Then you'll move on to customer obsession, which looks at how you can generate ideas, looking at things, for example, how to analyze customer expectations, how you can actually plan for new initiatives, and how you can take that forward after the workshop itself. And then day 2 looks at think big, start small, scale fast. So in effect, what that looks like is looking at key principles of Agile, how you can apply a sprint-based approach, what your MVP is, which is your minimum viable product, and effectively it looks at how you can implement Agile-based principles moving forward. And then the final part of the session is looking at that right culture for innovation. So how you can actually drive it, what you need to do to be able to kind of get that framework and that infrastructure in place, and looking at barriers to change as well, because quite often we'll find that with any type of transformation or any type of digital leadership, there's barriers to change. So it's looking at how you can overcome those barriers. And the takeaway from the whole session is that you've got a plan in place then, hopefully, which you can take forward to implement. And as I mentioned earlier, we're keen to make it an interactive and excellent learning journey, learning experience. But the real value comes from, okay, what do you do next? And we believe this gives you that foundation to be able to create that plan moving forward, to be able to kind of implement that digital transformation or whatever objective that may be in relation to digital. So I'll move on to the Squared Online program. So as I mentioned before, this is a digital marketing global certification. So you get a Google Squared Online with certification at the end of it, which is a globally recognized qualification. And what this looks at is fundamentals of digital marketing. Also looks at kind of the key leadership attributes needed for digital marketing. So quite often the audience for this particular program genuinely has range. So we've had kind of digital marketing execs, head of marketing departments. We've had kind of juniors, if you will, kind of people at the beginning of the career, people that are responsible for, it might be, for example, a small business where you're responsible for your digital marketing. So we've had a variety of different people actually enroll into this particular program, not just in Guernsey, but across the whole piece. But it really is open to kind of people at different points of their digital marketing journey. And what I've done at the bottom there is just put a few key facts I won't read them all out, but just a few key facts there at the bottom about kind of the graduates that we've had from the program that we've been delivering for the last few years. And again, these stats, these statistics have been taken from different organisations across the globe, not just in Guernsey. So you can see quite a lot of kind of positive change has happened as a result of this particular programme. I'll move on now to the actual journey itself. So the programme itself is made up of 5 modules, which you can see there. So the first one, embracing change, that's looking at kind of digital disruption and how kind of the changes that we've noticed in the last few years of consumer behaviour and the changes in tech. So that embracing change module summarises and looks at that. Then we have the customer centricity, which looks at kind of what a customer journey looks like, what the brand mission is, kind of the social and the content surrounding that, and how to target a customer with all of those things like brand and content, as I mentioned. The third module looks at digital channels and technology. That looks at kind of mobile tech, kind of search, Google search, keywords, display, video, programmatic, if you're familiar with digital marketing. So all of those things will kind of be covered in that particular module. Then we have the data analytics and insights, which looks at Google Analytics, attribution models, kind of looking at single customer views. And then we have creating change at the end of that particular program, which looks at the latest tech developments, organizational culture, and how to drive that from a kind of a digital marketing leadership point of view. So there's a lot of what we found within this program. There's a lot of leadership principles that can be taken forward as well. But as I mentioned before, the audience can really vary in terms of the skill set. So those 5 modules are all delivered online through an online campus, and it's overall a 6-month program. So each module approximately is about 5 weeks long, 5 to 6 weeks, which then takes you across that 6-month journey. And the campus itself, the online learning, is made up of a variety of different things. So there's a lot of tasks and activities in there, which we'll be looking at kind of case studies. You'll have live classes as well, which are part of that. There'll be guest speakers. The modules themselves are made up of group projects in the main. So you'll be working with, whether that's people on the island, whether that's people off the island. So working collaboratively, working with other members that are actually on the cohort, and actually submitting a group project at the end of each of these modules. So there's no exams that need to be taken, but ultimately it's about ensuring that that online learning experience is interactive through those activities. And if this is something that potentially you are looking into, what we did for the first cohort was run a little bit of a taster session where we ran through the campus and kind of went into the syllabus a little bit more. So I'm conscious I've only touched on kind of or skimmed on the detail at the moment, but absolutely I'm happy to share more details on this if this is something that you feel would be beneficial.
Carl, I might just add in on there as well.
Yeah,
I think we have a cohort at the moment who are almost at graduation. They're almost there, aren't they?
Yeah, start of April. Yeah,
and so they came on board in September. One of the I think the strongest pieces of feedback that we've had so far has been the global connectedness of this program. So they've been in groups that have included peers within the island, but also people outside of Guernsey. So they're working with people in digital marketing. It might be over in America, it might be in the UK, it might be in Europe. They found that really, really valuable to their learning, being able to connect out to other people and learn from their experiences. And I think also to Carl's comment on the previous slide about the experience as well, we've had a real mixed group for the first group. So people who are quite new to their digital marketing journey, as well as those people who are far more established. The nature of the way in which the program is created around group work as well as individual work, and those groups being global by nature, means that everybody at those different levels gets a real value out of the program. So I think it really is both it can be sort of the first stepping stone around digital marketing, but it can also have real leadership opportunity depending on where you or your employees may be in their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, Lucy, it's again similar to what I mentioned about the digital leaders. If you do know any of the cohort that are kind of on that journey, I know that I think it was Emma that recently released the case study, talking about the program and kind of the challenges with it, but also the positives as well. So yeah, again, my advice with any of these programs, if you do know people, I think it's great I can stand here and talk about them, but it's the individuals that are actually going through them that are in kind of the best place to talk about it and what the learning has done for them in terms of impact. So I think it's good to kind of have those conversations and kind of have that network. And going back to what you mentioned there, Lucy, I think it's a good point to mention that, yeah, it does have that global reach. There's an opportunity to speak to other digital marketing professionals, kind of share good practice. As part of the online learning, we encourage participation through the group projects, but also through forums as well. So it's an option. We try and, conscious that it's online, so we try and make it as interactive as possible. So you're actually not just kind of learning content and staring at your laptop all day. It's actually kind of engaging content that you'll be reviewing and actually having conversations with people. So I'll just jump on to apprenticeships. Just before I kind of dive into the detail of data analyst, I just bear in mind that I've actually picked this as an example. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're actually delivering currently the data analyst level 4 and the IT infrastructure technician level 3. So if there are other apprenticeship programs potentially that you might be interested in, for example, we deliver digital marketing, business analyst, just to name a couple. So if you're thinking actually data isn't for you, still the apprenticeship kind of infrastructure and the information I'll be sharing will be relevant. It'll just be different content for a different apprenticeship program. But the reason why I've chosen data is because when we've had conversations with people, that tends to be the one that's in most demand at the moment. So I felt it would be good to focus on this. So just bear in mind, if you think I'm interested in apprenticeship, but not the data one, then by all means, we can have kind of a separate conversation on that. But the best way to describe the apprenticeship for me is that it's broken down into 2 components, really. And you're learning through kind of the first aspect is the practical side. So what we've got to ensure with that practical component is that an individual's day-to-day job role can get exposure to those relevant areas. So within each apprenticeship, there's a list of normally about 10 to 15 bullet points, what we call technical competencies, that the learner needs to demonstrate the competence in. So without the job role being able to match those competencies, it makes it very difficult to enroll into the apprenticeship if they've not got that right. So that's the practical aspect, and what they need to do throughout that program, usually about 18 months, they would need to demonstrate the competence in those relevant areas, and they would do that by real life projects and real life tasks that they're working on as part of the role. And then the second aspect to it, so that's the first part. The second aspect is the learning in the theory, which is done through a variety of different methods. So we have live online classes delivered by tutors. There's online learning, e-modules, catch-up sessions with coaches. All of those things kind of represent the learning aspect of it. And I think the key thing to note, particularly with the data analyst apprenticeship, is that more and more, really over the last 2 to 3 years, that it's not just for people working within data. So people might see this and think, right, I need data analyst in my job title, and that's certainly not the case, because more and more people we're finding are taking on kind of more data-driven duties within the job role. So I think a key thing to note with this is that if you've got someone that's working, well, it could be any department, but if you've got people working in a department and a big part of their job role is to focus on data, or you want them to start focusing on data, whether that's kind of visualization, working across dashboards, could be a variety of different things. It potentially could be the right fit. So it's just worth bearing in mind that they don't need data analyst in their job title to enroll for this. We'd kind of review it and see if those competencies would fit. And there's really 2 routes into this program, into kind of every apprenticeship program. So you kind of got your traditional apprentices, where that's recruiting new young talent into the business. I know one of the apprentices that are currently on the cohort with Guernsey at the moment, it was for an organisation to recruit kind of new young talent. So we supported them with that to get that individual in place. So that's kind of your traditional apprenticeship, and probably as most people know it. But what we've seen in the last 3, 4, 5 years is that more and more now businesses are looking at existing colleagues to reskill. So you might have an individual that's maybe had 1 or 2 years experience, not really got any formal qualifications, but the apprenticeship program will help them give the skills, the knowledge and the behaviours to support all of that. So quite often now we're finding that it's not just new hire recruits, it's actually existing colleagues that are already in place that are looking to upskill and develop the knowledge and the behaviour. So just bear in mind, you've got those two routes. And again, if this is a programme that's potentially of interest, we'll put the details at the end, but typically what I would do is put some time in separately to meet with you on a one-to-one basis, talk about the apprenticeship, talk about what options are available. So that's something that we can look to do potentially after today's call. So that's really in a nutshell. Wasn't really a nutshell, that was it. It was quite a long-winded way of explaining what an apprenticeship is. But the topics within data, you can see some of them there. So it's an introduction to data analysis, looking at SQL, data gathering, dashboards, rapid minor, regression. You might be looking at all these terminologies and thinking it doesn't make sense to me, and that's absolutely fine. But what we'll do is kind of before any potential enrolments is actually talk about these, what they mean and what the benefits could be potentially to the organisation. And it's typically across an 18-month period, the apprenticeship. And this is just a little bit more of what a learner journey would look like. Again, I've chosen the data analyst as the example. Rather than kind of read each of these words, I'll just pick out the key components. So within each apprenticeship programme, you can see the grey bar across the top, just underneath the timeline. And that mentions regular learning and development coach meetings. So as part of the programme, an apprentice will be assigned a learning and development coach. And as part of their role, they'll have monthly reviews with the apprentice and also the line manager. And those review meetings are all about making sure that they're up to date and they're making the right progress. They also can advise what needs to be covered from the practical component in terms of what projects and tasks can be used. And they'll also be able to support the individual with the learning aspect as well. And the learning and development coaches that we employ are people that are industry specific. So for example, with our data analyst apprenticeship, the people that have previously worked within a data team or worked in a data analyst position. So they'll have a good understanding of the topic and the kind of some of the challenges that the role might face as well. So they're not kind of general coaches, they're people that have actually worked and come from industry, which will then be working with the apprentice across the 18-month period to support them. That's kind of the main level of support, the learning and development coach. Then kind of just a few key points. Focus on the kind of the bottom section, the grey box is where it says week 1, week 2, week 3 and week 4. So that just gives an overview of the syllabus and what they'll be learning in each of the classroom sessions, the live sessions. So for the data analyst program, we break it up into block release. So week 1 is typically delivered over a 5-day period. So for 5 successive days, they will be out of the business. So Monday to Friday, they'll be out of the business studying kind of all those topics that you see under week 1. Week 2 delivered over 4 days. Week 3 is also over 4 days, and then week 4 is across 3 days. So the block release, where they'll be out of the business for a certain period of time. And what we do at the beginning of the program is share a study schedule. So if you're thinking as a line manager or as a departmental manager, I'm not going to be aware when I'm going to lose my member of staff. What we do at the beginning of the program is share a full study schedule, so you'll know the dates well in advance across that 18-month period, so you can then plan kind of workloads and diaries around that. But yeah, that's kind of a few key points about the apprenticeship. They'll have something called an endpoint assessment at the end, which is about kind of verifying all the skills and everything that they've learned throughout the program, and then what they'll gain at the end of the apprenticeship program. In this example, they'll gain the data analyst level 4 standard, but they also have certifications as well, which they'll gain as part of this particular program. You can see it under week 3 and week 4. So they'll cover the BCS data analyst concepts, which is the British Computer Society data analyst concept qualification. In addition to that, in week 4, you'll see that it covers the BCS data analyst tool as well. So they're actually certifications that they'll gain as part of the one program. And you'll find that's quite common for most other apprenticeship, that there's a lot of vendor qualifications that are built into that.
I think just to pick up on Carl's points there as well, what we found really interesting with working with Avado this year with the first pilot group of apprenticeships is the digital first nature of this program. So we think it's quite different in terms of the offer, and really from a Guernsey perspective does allow a very flexible way for people who are currently employed to upskill or reskill themselves. So a number of the people, so we have 4 currently on this journey, and whilst they are all at very different levels of, or different parts of their career, the majority are people who are already working and who are looking to pivot their skill sets and move into a slightly different area of the business. So it's a very different way of looking, from a Guernsey terms, it's a very different way of looking at an apprenticeship program, but so far it's been very successful.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. So move on to the 4th and the final initiative. So this is a new one that we're launching in May. So we've the 5th of May and then the 19th and the 20th of May, when we're running these workshops. We'll share details in the chat afterwards. But ultimately, it's what we call a targeting the customer campaign, and it's made up of 2 workshops. So the first one is called Customer-Centric Marketing. We call it a mini lab. So that's delivered usually over a 3-hour period, so approximately half a day. And that particular session will be on the 5th of May. And then that learning that you take from the Customer-Centric Marketing mini lab, 2 weeks later, will then take you into what we call the Brand Activation Lab. It's a lot of labs, I'm conscious of that. So brand activation will be in a couple of weeks, or a couple of weeks after the marketing mini lab, and that will be delivered over 2 half-day sessions. And the purpose of this particular campaign really is to kind of look at different points where you target your customer. We looked at kind of a variety of different things, so understanding your customer's journey and moments before they purchase. What signals do they give off before actually making that purchase? Do they put things into the basket, for example, and then take it out again? So it looks at kind of understanding that journey a little bit more. We use the See, Think, Do, Care framework. If you're familiar with Google, you might have seen that before. So that's kind of the framework that we use to build that action plan in place. And ultimately, kind of I think probably to summarize it in one sentence, it's to look at kind of how you target the right audience at the right time with the right message. So that's kind of what it focuses on across kind of the whole campaign, i.e. the 2 workshops. So what you'll have at the end of it is being in a position where you've got that marketing and comm strategy, or at least that framework in place to be able to take forward. And in terms of the duration, delivered over, I mentioned, a 3 half-day period. So yeah, it's made up of 2 workshops. I can understand it being, there might be some questions on this, because I can understand you thinking it says targeting the customer. That's what we call the kind of the campaign. And then underneath that, you've got your customer-centric marketing mini lab, which is the half-day workshop. 2 weeks later, you've then got your brand activation lab. So hopefully that makes sense, but obviously happy to answer any questions if it doesn't. So just to focus on the first workshop, which is the customer-centric marketing. And as I mentioned before, what kind of the purpose of this is to introduce you and get you ready for the second session, which is the brand activation lab. So again, mentioned before about introducing the See, Think, Do, Care framework. So it'll introduce that, introduce those micro moments. So again, the moments of when to target your customers and how to do it. And kind of the purpose in terms of the mindset is to give that customer-centric mindset. So thinking about your customer's journey, at what points do they show intent, what points do they withdraw that intent, and kind of looking at all of that and giving you that foundation which you can then take on to the brand activation lab. So I'll kind of best summarize this I can, because I do realize it's a lot of kind of a lot of images and a lot of text. So I'll focus on the bottom part here where it talks about session 1 and session 2. So session 1 is in effect the first half day of this particular session. And what this looks like is how to identify your audience. So kind of the first part of it is who is your audience, how to identify them, who purchases what products, and kind of looking at that and how you can define that. Then it looks at kind of the signals that customers give before purchase. So each customer will tend to have a journey, and it looks at kind of what moments, what signals do they give off before purchase. It's the patterns that we find, what patterns to look out for. And then kind of the final part of the first half day is looking at ad formats, looking at kind of how to target them, what formats to use, and what points of the journey where you need to deliver that relevant message. Then the day after, the next session, session 2, looks at how to actually produce the right content and the right messaging for your audience. So again, looking at whether that's done through social media channels, whether that's done through YouTube adverts, whatever that might be, kind of looking at that most appropriate messaging and that content. Then the next part looks at measuring and analysing your campaign. So how do you determine whether or not it's been successful? And again, things to look out for. And quite often you would set kind of success matrix almost, where you would analyse and kind of determine what success would look like and what it wouldn't. And then at the end, again, going back to really all of our solutions about kind of creating that plan and that roadmap that you can take forward. And in terms of the audience, I'm conscious I've not mentioned that yet. The audience, quite often we find in people that are enrolling onto this will be people that are leading on the digital marketing, business owners, for example, that are responsible for the marketing strategy. It could be people that are working across your social media. So if you're involved in some form of marketing activities, generally speaking, we find that it applies to those individuals. So if you're in some way responsible for implementing your marketing strategy or actually writing that strategy, actually putting that together, then this overall campaign across the 2 workshops would normally find applicable for those people. And then just to finish on a quote, I can understand it's a little bit cheesy, but I can't take credit for this. It was Charles Darwin, so not quite as intelligent as him, but it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that's most adaptable to change. And I think in the last 12 months, we've seen that more than ever. And any business reports that you read, whether that's on Deloitte, McKinsey, or any others, you'll see it's the businesses that have been the most adaptable and the ones that have changed quickly. Admittedly, that does have risk, of course, but it's about trying to minimise those risks. And I think kind of the key message from this and this key principle is that it is those businesses that are most adaptable to the change that will generally thrive, certainly in this environment. So it would be good just to end and enlighten you with a quote. Hopefully it's gone down well. But that's really an overview of everything today. I'm conscious there might be some questions that have popped up in the meantime. But to find out more about the different programs, you can see a link to the website there and the landing page. Also contact Lucy and Ben at Digital Greenhouse. And then particularly about the apprenticeship program, because that requires more kind of detailed conversations, if you will, about kind of what apprenticeship is suitable. Feel free to contact me directly. You can see my email address there. So yeah, that concludes today. And I mentioned earlier that kind of the purpose of today's session was just to give you those snippets of each of those learning solutions, each of those initiatives, with a view to hopefully finding out a little bit more, which we've got plenty more information to share on the syllabus and the details of each program. So hopefully it's been useful. So yeah, I'll just try and check to see if there's been any questions that have come through in the meantime.
So I think just whilst we're having a look at questions, and I think a poll's just popped up as well for people to interact with. So the programs that you've seen today all make up part of the Smart Guernsey partnership working that we have through the States of Guernsey. So through their work with Agilicis Guernsey, we have a number of funded places for these opportunities. So if you pop on through to the Greenhouse website and take a look at those programs, you can see the flight plan of when they're being delivered, and there are opportunities to receive fully funded access onto the programs. which has been so far over the past 9 months a great way for small business as well as larger businesses to be able to do things like take on an apprentice or upskill their staff where it may not otherwise have been financially viable for them to do so. And I think sort of going back to where we started at the beginning and reiterating some of Carl's comments, what we're looking to do here is to really support the upskilling programs, support business growth, and allow people to really get to grips with how they can be in effect ahead of the curve with the right skill sets and mindsets to take their businesses forward. So we're really pleased to have further conversation. If you don't want to sort of put questions up now and you want to get hold of us, then please do pop a message through to Carl, to me, to the Greenhouse, and we'll be really happy to look at how we can work with you moving forwards.
Don't think there's been any questions that have popped up. I'll just give it a few seconds.
You did such a good job, Carl, of covering everything.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope that's how it's been. Hope that's how it's been received. Or people are just too confused that they don't know where to start. Hoping it's not that. Yeah. Cheers. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Kate.